What I want people to think about is the fact that AI isn't going to solve everything for you. It can't. It's not a magic bullet for your business. And if you've got messed up processes in your business, you've got to sort those out first before you should ever start to apply any kind of automation.
Welcome to the Agents of Change, the podcast experience you've been waiting for your entire marketing career. Search, social, mobile, AI, blockchain, and neuromarketing. These are the Agents of Change, and so are you. Digital marketing success awaits, and your transformation begins now.
Welcome to another episode of the Agents of Change podcast, the podcast that helps you reach and engage more of your ideal customers online so you can grow your business. My name's Rich Brooks. I'm your host. This is episode 607, powered by Flight New Media. For you regular listeners to the show, you may remember that I presented at CEX, the Content Entrepreneurs Expo, earlier this year on building an AI assistant after my friend Mike Allton was unable to make it to the event. Well, now I'm giving him back the spotlight as I bring him back onto the Agents of Change podcast for a second time, this time to talk about building your first AI assistant. Before we get to that, I want to share one of the ways that I'm using AI on my own sales and marketing. Here at Flight, I'm responsible for sales, and because of that, I take a lot of Zoom calls with businesses that are looking for a new website, or they need help running Google ads, or they just want to be better at SEO and get more online visibility. After we do our sales calls, it's up to me to write a proposal for how we can best help them. I already have this templated proposal, so often it's more about what to remove rather than what to add. If they didn't need a website, I remove that part. If they want SEO but plan on doing the SEO copywriting themselves, I'll pare back that part, and so on. I'll customize the beginning and the end of the proposal, but for years I didn't change much else. Now I've created an AI assistant to help me tailor those proposals further. I have an AI that reads through the transcript of the sales call, which I record on Zoom with the help of Fathom that does my AI note-taking and does the transcript of the show. And then it reviews the proposal, tells me which sections to keep, which sections to remove, all based on the call and the needs of that business. Then for each section that I'm going to keep, it gives me the original kind of boilerplate language, its recommended improvements, and the reasoning behind its recommendations. It's up to me to put those changes into place into the proposal, but I'm okay with that. I'm sure I could create a workflow that would add it automatically, but even though it's trained in my voice, I don't want to give it that level of autonomy. I want to have my hands on it. My goal isn't to be faster, although that's a nice side effect. It's to be better. And maybe more importantly, it's to be human. That's also why I embed a personalized video from me at the top of the proposal where I talk my prospect through what I'm recommending and why, all in 2 minutes or less. Even though I'm leveraging the power of AI, I want to reinforce the idea that they will be working with humans if they hire Flight. Anyway, that's my AI field notes this week, just sharing some of my thoughts on workflows and on AI. I hope you found it helpful and feel free to steal my ideas. Now, let's check out the Leonardo da Vinci of AI assistants. Don't worry, that's going to make more sense in a few minutes on this week's podcast. My next guest is the creator of the AI Hat and an AI architect for creators, solopreneurs, and micro businesses. He helps ambitious business owners, the folks wearing all the hats, stop the overwhelm and reclaim their most valuable resource, which is, of course, time. Through his no-nonsense, human-centered approach, he designs AI-powered workflows that solve operational inefficiencies and enable scalable growth. He's also the host of the AI Hat podcast and the author of The Ultimate Guide to Social Media Marketing. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can create your first AI assistant with Mike Allton. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rich. I am really excited to be on your show. You were on my show. We've known each other for years, and it's kind of funny that we're finally interviewing each other after all this time.
Yes. Well, this is your second or third time, I think, on the podcast.
Is it really?
You did an influencer one
gosh.
for sure.
Okay.
And for some
okay.
reason, I thought you may have done one other topic as well. But regardless, here you are back for another time, another go round on the Agents of Change. And it's funny because literally, I write out some of these questions. And my first question was, we've known each other for a little while.
Yep.
So yeah, you already referenced that. We've known each other for a while, well before AI was on every marketer's lips. I'm curious, Mike, if you had an aha moment where you're like, I have to pivot to AI, or was it a series of things that happened where you're like, this is where I want to spend my time for the next few years?
Oh, wow. So definitely my first exposure to AI was not an aha moment. My first exposure was, I'm going to shut them out a little bit here, Conversion.ai, which they then became Jarvis for a hot minute. They were sued and then they become Jasper. So now they're Jasper. They're a great tool today. But when I was first using them back when it was Conversion.ai, it was not a great tool. They had templates for different kinds of marketing content, and you'd say, I want a Facebook ad or I want a social media post or whatever. And there was like a drop-down box where you could pick a voice of somebody like Gary Vee. Like my social content should sound like Gary Vee.
Right.
It shouldn't, and it didn't. And so I was kind of underwhelmed with what AI was doing at that point, right? But then, of course, ChatGPT came out later, because this is probably 2020, 2021. AI was not new with ChatGPT. It's been around for years. But when ChatGPT came out with their latest version in 2022, that was definitely an eye-opening moment. And my aha moment specifically was probably a month or two after that, when Paul Raitzer was riffing off of something Sam Altman said. And the gist of it was that in a few years, AI is going to handle 95% of the marketing work. Well, that stopped me. I mean, literally stopped me going. I don't usually say things like that stopped me, but it really did, because obviously as a marketer, I'm thinking, man, am I about to be replaced by machines? And so that led me to want to explore what AI meant today, because it's been around for decades, frankly. But what does AI mean today? These tools, what can they really do? Is my job really at risk? And that kind of broadened in my mind to include friends like you, folks that I've known in this industry now for almost 2 decades, who we've all been doing social media and content, video and podcasts and so on. Are we all going to be replaced by AI? So I figured the best way for me to learn was to start interviewing really smart folks and literally picking their brain. I did it under the guise of a podcast, so I didn't have to pay them. I could just bring them onto the show and ask them all my questions. And it was extremely enlightening. And hopefully some folks have gotten to learn along the way.
Excellent. All right. Now, today's conversation is going to be around how to build your first AI assistant. This was a presentation you were queued up to deliver at CEX. You were unable to do it. They asked me to fill in. I'm sure you would have done a better job. We won't even go there. But before I even ask this question, how do you define AI assistants? When somebody says that, what does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, I know you did more than yeoman work at CEX, so thank you for filling in. For me, an AI assistant, first of all, is different from an AI agent, and we can get into AI agents if you want to, but AI assistant is any AI that is able to repeatedly do a process on your behalf. That might be a very, very specific task, like take a long form piece of content like a podcast episode and pull a tweet out of it. That's something that would take seconds. But if that's something you're doing on a regular basis, why not have an AI assistant trained to do that perfectly? Or it might be something much more extensive, like preparing for an interview. That's how I use podcasts all the time. Or it might be as broad as having an AI assistant that, for me, as an example, acts as an AI chief of staff, where I have an AI trained on my business, myself, my goals, my blockers and challenges. Like, it knows that for the AI hat, I'm a solopreneur. I don't have a lot of revenue, so don't suggest that I do a $10,000 a month LinkedIn ad campaign. That's not going to happen. That's not in the cards. So it knows more than just how I talk. It knows how I think. It knows how I want it to interact with me. And it's there as a strategic, almost a sparring partner. I mean, just last night, I had this idea, hey, what if I did a virtual event specifically on AI for solopreneurs and creators? I've got a ton of experience running virtual events. I can spin one up in 30 days. And I had all these fancy ideas. I threw it at it. And it said, Mike, that's not a good idea. And here's 5 reasons why. I mean, it really broke out how this was not a good idea for me. And maybe that's just the starting point of a conversation, or maybe, yeah, that really is a flat no, I shouldn't do that. But the point is, as a solopreneur, even a micro business owner, we often don't have that person that we can bounce ideas off of and get real-time good advice, not just a yes man, which a lot of the AI can be. If you just use ChatGPT out of the box and ask it, is this a good idea? Yes, Rich, that is the best idea I've ever heard. But what if it's not? So for me, that's one of the most important AI assistants we can set up.
And I would argue it's not just for solopreneurs, because I have a team of 9 people here besides myself in the office. I obviously people to talk to, but not everything can I talk to them about. And sometimes it's late at night and I want to bounce ideas. I've got an agency mastermind that I created. I have other people to talk to, but there's still that moment where sometimes it's just, you need to sharpen your thoughts, and to have somebody to bounce or something to bounce ideas off can be helpful, even if you're really just talking to yourself. Before we dig any deeper, though, I want to talk to you about that, because you said something that's really important. I was using, as I'm working on this presentation for tomorrow, and I use AI back and forth to kind of come up with ideas and flows and everything else. I'll ask it a question, and then I'll ask a clarifying question. And as soon as I hit like enter, I knew it was going to say, brilliant observation, right? And this one, I wasn't using my trained one. I was just using ChatGPT that knows me a little bit. And I'm like, stop doing that. So Mike, this may be the $64,000 question. What are you doing, or what do you recommend doing, so we don't just get pats on the back from AI, but we get real insights that can help us make better decisions?
Fantastic question. And there's a couple different ways you can go about it. The first is, certainly if you have a trained assistant that you're talking to, you can train them, you can tell them what I'm about to tell you, or just in an individual prompt. If you're just doing a straight up prompt, maybe you're in ChatGPT or Claude, or maybe you're in one of the new tools like Notion that has AI built in, but maybe you haven't actually figured out how to train it and you just want to have a conversation with it. You want to tell it to challenge your assumptions. Then you are basically giving it permission to push back on anything that you are suggesting or saying or assuming in the context of whatever it is that you're asking it to talk to about. The other thing that I always tell my AI to do is ask me clarifying questions. I just came back from Maycon, and one of the keynotes there was Jeff Woods, who wrote the book, The AI-Driven Leader. And that's almost the central premise of his book, is to make sure that you are telling the AI to interview you. You can give it all the role and context you want, but give it permission to ask you questions, to follow it up. He specifies, in fact, telling it to ask 3 questions, depending on the scenario, a very specific number of questions. I've never really tried that, but I always give it permission to ask me questions, because as good as I am at maybe creating a prompt and giving it all the context, there's always more that I will have forgotten to do. And so when you do those 2 things, now you can have a real conversation with the artificial intelligence like it's a member of your mastermind, and give it that permission to really, honestly, think outside the box.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because one of the things that I find AI really good at that humans are bad at is finding those gaps. And when you're dealing with a large language model, there's so much more data it can store than you can store, that there's things you just don't see from our limited experience, kind of like the 7 blind men who surround an elephant, and one of them thinks it's a tree trunk and the other one thinks it's a snake. So great point in terms of like identifying those gaps. Now, I want to get back to the presentation, because the presentation had this through line in it that you put together, where it was comparing modern AI assistants to Leonardo da Vinci's workshop. Can you kind of explain what you meant by that, and maybe even how you came up with that analogy?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first, because to your point, AI, most of the AIs that we deal with have an incredible amount of information. I went to school for history, so I'm well-versed in mostly Western European history, but that doesn't mean I know everything. It certainly doesn't mean I can remember everything that I studied at Ohio State a couple decades ago. So I'll often create a scenario, whether it's a blog post or a presentation or whatever. This is the topic we're talking about. And I can just ask the AI, hey, give me some historical analogies that fit this scenario. So very transparently, the analogy of Leonardo da Vinci's workshop was something that Gemini came up with. There were probably several other options, and that's the one we went with because I liked it. I love Leonardo da Vinci. So the idea is pretty simple. As business owners, as professionals, sometimes the idea of going out for help is not a welcome one. Sometimes we're afraid to ask for help. Sometimes we think it makes us look weak, bad, whatever. And when you weave in the narrative of, oh, it's artificial help, it's a machine that's helping us, some people really push back on this. And unfortunately, there's a gender issue at play too. Many more women feel that they're cheating when they use AI than men for many different reasons that we don't want to go into. But I've had guests on the podcast specifically to talk about this and help push back on that narrative and help women see that, no. We should be using AI. We should be using a lot of AI. But I weaved in the story of Leonardo because we wanted to come up with an analogy that might make sense to folks and help them feel better about building not just one AI assistant, but a whole team of AI assistants. So we're here talking about this maestro, right, from Renaissance Italy. What most of you listening might not realize is that the maestro did in fact have a team of assistants in Genoa, Italy. He had folks who were mixing pigments and cleaning his brushes and preparing the canvases and maybe even doing some of the painting on the canvases or preparation or packing. He had a whole team of people. So I had AI generate an image for me. It's not a real image. We don't have real pictures from back then, but I had AI generate an image for me of Leonardo da Vinci in his workshop, literally surrounded by all these men of the Renaissance. And we zoomed in on one guy who was really carefully grinding in a mortar and pestle, this blue pigment, which happens to be, I think it's called blue marine. It was really expensive back then. So you need to have somebody like really well trained who wasn't just going to throw this stuff all over the room like my daughter might, right? Keep it controlled, keep it contained in that mortar and pestle, and prepare for the master when he was ready for it. That's the analogy I created for folks. Have AI assistants who do either very specific things or broad things, but they're trained not just to do those things, but they're trained to do them the way you would do them, so that you can focus on the amazing things in your business, working with your clients, whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that you want to do, where you want to spend your time, and have AI assistants that you can turn to handle the routine stuff.
I'm guessing that there's a whole phase where we need to figure out what we want to outsource, but let's table that for a second.
Yep.
Once we've identified one AI assistant that we want, walk me through your process for creating this, whether it's in ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Gem, whatever it is, step by step. How are you going to build this tool?
Yeah, and just to underscore what you just inferred, you can do this in ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude. It works the same way. What we're talking about setting up is a set of custom instructions. In ChatGPT, it's a custom GPT. In Gemini, it's a gem. In Claude, it's a project. You give it a name and you type in the instructions. And if you're not sure exactly what to do or how to type it in there, start a blank chat with your LLM of choice and tell it, I want to make a gem or a custom GPT that does X, Y, and Z. Help me get there, and it will do it. It's amazing the way this technology has evolved. So the idea here is think about a specific task that you're doing on a routine basis. If you're doing it once or twice, probably not. But if you're doing it 3, 5, 10 times in the course of a day or a week or a month, that sounds like something that at some point you could probably work AI into that process. Maybe it's not the whole thing, and that's okay. Maybe it's some aspect of it, or maybe it's a collaborative thing. Like when I'm getting ready for a podcast, I give the AI, my AI assistant, I have a showrunner AI assistant. I give it the name of the interviewee. I give it their LinkedIn. I give it what the interviewee wanted to talk about in the interview. And the AI looks at all that and starts spitballing at me. Oh, you know what? We could talk with Rich about X, Y, and Z. And then I pick one. And then it says, great, here's 10 titles based on that topic. And I pick one. And then we go on through this whole process. It's very collaborative. I have mapped out in the instructions those steps. I tell the AI, ask me for the guest name, and then wait, and then ask for their LinkedIn, and then wait, and so on. So that means there's a process. So if you're listening right now and you're thinking about something that you've done more than once or twice, thinking, oh yeah, that's something I really don't enjoy doing it, or it takes me a lot of time, maybe I could have AI help me. The first step is to document that process. It's got to be documented, or else you're not going to know what to tell the AI. But once you have that document, then you're ready to rock and roll.
All right. So we have our instructions that we've laid out, and I don't want to get too deep into them, but we work through them. We have the instructions. I know that there's also knowledge docs or attachments that we can use. What role do they play in these AI assistants?
Exactly. So I was listening to your mutual friend, Andy Cristodina, who gave his talk on custom GPTs for the first time at MACON last week. And shout out to Andy. It was fantastic. He was nervous because he'd never given it before, but it was fantastic. And I loved how he framed these knowledge files. I'd been using knowledge files. They're basically, like you said, Rich, they're attachments. So you can attach a voice doc or whatever. But he pointed out that in every one of these LLMs, the field where you go to put in the instructions is limited. It's big. You can put a lot of stuff in there, but there is a limit in how much data you can put in there. So he said, hey, you could have a separate file that's your index. And it's got all the information that you could possibly want in there because there's basically no limit to those files. You can attach a PDF or a text. Probably 5 megabytes is the limit. Well, if you're using a text file, that would be massive. You would never hit that. And you can give that text file not only background information on your business and that sort of thing, but you can give it specific prompts that you can then reference in the chat, which was a little mind expanding for me. I'm used to opening up my custom GPT or my gem and having a conversation with it. It never occurred to me to put very specific tasks or prompts in the documentation for me to just say, hey, now let's go do that. That frees it up from me having to program a step-by-step thing to me now having a catalog of things that the AI can do for us, right? In his demonstration, he was showing us, as he does, how to analyze a website. And so he was able to call in things like, well, let's look at the conversion rate and here's the persona, or let's look at it from a different persona. There's all these different things that he was able to do. Right. And he just had a little index at the very top. Here's all the prompts that are in this file. And he had specific names that you can just remember or have on a sticky note if you want to, and really expand what those custom assistants can do.
So the way it sounds like what he was doing is the instructions themselves were as brief as he could make them, but he had plenty of documentation that he could access. Maybe he's accessing all of them. Maybe he's just accessing a few of them, to be able to create a more robust tool than we would have been able to make without those attachments, or if everything had to be in the instructions. Yeah. The other thing that I like about using those knowledge docs, or whatever you want to call them, is consistency between these AI assistants. So if I create a brand voice doc for myself or my company, and I want to be consistent across multiple tools, I can always attach the latest version of those documents to those tools so that my podcast assistant and my proposal writer and whatever AI assistants I have will all be able to sound like me, or they'll all know the ICPs, the buyer personas that we're going after.
That's exactly right. So I've got a folder on my desktop with those kinds of files, my target audience, my brand voice, some other very specific files about me, my business, my target audience, and so on. And you're right, for starters, once you really get into this, you end up naturally adding additional tools. You're never going to use just Gemini. Maybe you're also going to use Magi or Descript or Notion or Claude for certain purposes. And so it becomes helpful to have that kind of documentation standardized. The instructions that I put into my custom assistants, I have that standardized in a Google Doc, in a Google Drive folder. So when I need to update my AI chief of staff, I go to the Google Doc, and then I can copy and paste into Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT so that the same basic AI lives on each one of those platforms, and I can interact with it natively without having to switch back to a different platform if I'm already in there for something else.
All right. So far what we have is we're building out this AI assistant. Is we have the instructions on how it's going to behave. We also have these knowledge docs that provide context, provide ICPs, provide all the other information that we might need. What do we do next once we have those pieces in place?
Well, part of it depends, again, on the scope of your business. Like you're an agency, you've got employees. The first thing I'd want to do is make sure everyone in the organization has access to all these teammates and knows how to use them and when to use them, right? You might have client-facing materials or assistants that you're using on client projects. You want to make sure all that's documented and everybody knows how to do it. Personally, I don't have the problem. I do work for AgoraPulse full-time, but on the side, it's just me. I'm a solopreneur. I've got the dogs and the cats, and they don't help me. So it's just me. And I have to keep track of these assistants and remember, all right, I've got podcast showrunner, a podcast promotion assistant, a voice assistant, and so on. Because as things change in the business, the only way these assistants know it is if you go into the instructions and you tell them. right? 12 months ago, my target audience was very different than it is today. And so I needed to remember to go back in and update my assistants so that it had that context, because it's incredibly important. They're like employees. And that's the other mindset shift that I'm trying to get particularly small businesses to understand. You can treat these AI assistants as though they're employees. Actually, put them on the org chart. And that's a little bit freeing, because now we realize, oh, wow, that means now where 6 months ago, I told myself I couldn't afford to hire somebody to just do email marketing for my business. Now you can. You can have an AI assistant that's all they do is email marketing. And you just touch base with them every once in a while when you need them to do something, just as you would a regular employee.
Now, as we're creating these, it sounds like magic, but you and I both know it never works perfectly the first time. Talk to me a little bit about your iteration process and how you test the outputs to see if what you thought was going to work actually does work.
This is such an important point, and it's almost on like multiple levels. First, when you're creating the AI assistant for the first time, a custom GPT, a gem, a project, they all work the same way. They've got fields on one side for you to put in the title, the instructions, upload knowledge files, a couple of the settings you can play with if you want to. But then on the right side is a preview pane. So as soon as you pop in those instructions, you can go to the preview pane and type something in and see what kind of response you get back from your AI assistant. So there's immediate testing that you can do. But the next level thinking that I love that you just implied, which is that you can iterate on these, right? You can create an AI assistant and go back in 3 weeks or a month, and you can make changes to it real time if you want to, or you can completely blow it away and start over. If you feel like through the course of using it, some of the responses aren't quite right. Just this morning, I completely revamped my podcast showrunner assistant. I wanted it to do more. I needed it to update with some piece of information. So I worked with Gemini, gave it the original assistant instructions, said, here's what we're working with today. I need to make these 3 changes and let's build this together. And then you can turn on Canvas mode, which allows it to create a document, right? So it builds out a brand new version of the assistant. I read through it. I didn't just take it and copy and paste it in there. I read through it. And right away, I spotted, I think, 2 things. I was like, oh, we need to adjust that. So I go back into the chat, say, we need to adjust this, gives it to me. So then I copied and pasted in the instructions once I was happy with it. And now I'm testing it. I'm using it. And I'm not just using it to do the task. I'm paying attention to, is it as smooth as I would like it? Is it doing the things that I need it to do? In my case, for instance, I always have the AI, once we've like settled and collaborated on the topic and the questions and everything, it writes a custom introduction for the episode, framing the topic, and then it writes a custom introduction to the guest. They may give me a bio, they may not give me a bio. I don't care. I want to read something about them that's unique, that really hypes it up. That's in my instructions, and I'm using Claude to write all these things. So like when you're on the show, most people are like, wow, that's like the really best introduction I've ever heard. I need to bring you with me everywhere, right? And I say, Claude wrote that. But something kind of funny happened when I redid the instructions. So in that first paragraph where it's framing the topic, for some reason, it went on to introduce the guest, because I had 2 guests to prepare for this morning. And then it still did a second introductory paragraph, as though we didn't mention it in the first paragraph. It wasn't quite connected. It certainly wasn't smooth. Easy for me to edit out. But I don't want to have to edit that out every single time I create a new podcast. So I got to go back in the instructions and figure out, okay, where did we go wrong? Let me clarify. This paragraph is for the topic. This paragraph is for the guest. That's something you can do at any time. And I think it's kind of easy to forget that once we set these things up, they're not written in stone. It's just a text instruction. They're really easy to edit.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I would say that for me, I'm really careful about what I put out into the world from a written word standpoint. So when I've trained up AI to write with me, I never consider it more to be than a rough draft or a first draft. That's just me. I'm not judging anybody who puts it out there. But when I get the outputs, because I don't know about you, I'll watch a lot of YouTube videos about the perfect prompt, or you do this and you'll never have problems with ChatGPT again. And I'm like, oh my God, that's brilliant. And it's like, I'll just do it. And then I'm like, but how do you know it works? So for me, it's a lot of times going in, testing something out, getting the output and comparing it to the previous version. And is it actually any better? And sometimes with like, I have it write a blog post in my voice for my show notes. I'll always read that through and I'll make the edits that I would make as if somebody else gave it to me, or if I wrote it yesterday and I'm editing it today. And if there's enough significant changes, I'll go back to, in this case, Claude, and be like, here's my edited version. Compare that to the version you wrote. What changes do you see? And it will sometimes summarize the big changes. It uses the word actually all the time. I'm like, one time. You can use it one time, so I started to have to put extra controls in there too, because it was trying to sound like me, and it almost becomes like this increased version of me. Or that every single blog title ended in "and how to fix it" in parentheses. I'm like, you can do that once a year. Like, you're not allowed to do that more than once a year. So these are some of the issues. Sometimes I'll ask Claude or AI, how do I fix that? How do I avoid that next time? Should we rewrite it? Sometimes it'll say, this is a one-off, I wouldn't worry about it. Other times it says, try doing this in the instructions and see if it makes a difference. And so I think we have to be willing to put in that time to iterate, to get better responses, to save us time on the other side.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, a fun example these days is, people will say if you're using an M dash in your content, that's a red flag for AI. And interestingly, in my content, it would be. I don't use the M dash. I use space, hyphen, space, and I don't know why. I always have. I don't use that long hyphen, but I had to tell the AI, don't use the M dash. That's not me. I would never use that particular form of punctuation.
Yeah. And for me, I'm like, you can take my M dash when you peel it from my cold, dead fingers, and don't even get me started on semicolons. But yeah, no, I totally hear that. So I do think that there does have to be, you have to be willing to put in the work, the iteration, and you can't just hope that it's going to put out the best content. You have to be looking at that output and providing some sort of feedback to it.
I think you may also find, like I know you have, is that some models are better for certain tasks than others. I swear by Gemini. I love Gemini. I'm in it every day, but I just can't get the writing out of Gemini to be as good as Claude. No matter what I do, I'll take a draft out of Gemini. I'll share it with Claude. Claude will say, you know what? That's a pretty solid foundation, but here's 6 things you could have done better about that. And it is always, always, always better. I'll take the finished product out of Claude, put it back into Gemini, and Gemini's like, yeah, that's great. Won't affect the next output from Gemini.
Yeah, I know. I find that Claude is better for writing, but ChatGPT is better for staying within the parameters that I laid out for it. So that's, it's like I tend to prefer the way that Claude writes. So that's why I use it for that blog post. But then it never really seems to nail down the length of certain things like that I have. So I think sometimes you just have to be willing to say, this is a great rough draft or a nearly finished draft. But ultimately, I still feel we have to be involved in all these sort of things.
100%.
So one of the things that we kind of skipped over, and could be an entire other topic, is how do we decide what we want to offshore or delegate? You have an audit on your website, I believe. Talk to us a little bit about how that audit fits into determining what we should be outsourcing.
This is such an important question, because what I want people to think about is the fact that AI isn't going to solve everything for you. It can't. It's not a magic bullet for your business. And if you've got messed up processes in your business, you've got to sort those out first before you should ever start to apply any kind of automation. And I say automation very specifically because you might just need something like a Zapier connection to a couple tools to start talking to each other, moving information back and forth, which is not AI at all. It's certainly not an AI agent. It's just an automation. We've had that for years. But many of us either A, weren't aware of it, or B, just haven't taken the time. So the scalability audit is just a tool. It's a worksheet. You can get it for free at theaihat.com/scalability or not. You don't need to. You just need to write down for a few days, what are you doing? What are you doing with your time? How are you devoting your precious amount of minutes every single day to specific areas of your business, and what are they? And then after you make that list of, what you did, how much time you spent, then you can start to bucket it. Was this something that actually moved the needle for my business? Did this task drive revenue? Or is it kind of the opposite of the expression? It was just something that I did, but I'm finding I'm doing this every single day, replying to emails, other kinds of routine, boring, administrative stuff. I call it an admin tax. And the smaller your business, the bigger those admin taxes usually are. and they're really dragging you down as a business. Particularly, again, the smaller your business, the more your business depends on you, the individual, or you, the small business owner, to get really impactful stuff done. And if you're being weighed down by responding to the same FAQ every single day, that's got to be solved. But there's certain things like maybe you've got a membership community and they sign up on your website and you get an email notification. Then you need to go put their name and their email address in your membership community. And then you also need to give them access to your Visio repository. And then you also need to remember to add them to your monthly calendar where you've got your group coaching. And oh God, forget about it if they cancel, because those things are never going to be updated. They'll just live in your community for 6 months for free. And you're just okay with that because it's 5 or 6 moving parts, 5 or 6 manual entries that you never connected the dots to. But if you just jump into Zapier, you could probably automate 90%, 100% of that. And when you make a sale, now it's, yes, I got a new member, rather than, oh, I've got 6 things I have to do now and spend all that time wasted doing those things. So that's the first step. And I think it's the most important step is to do that audit. And honestly, the hardest part is not to judge and try to fix as we go. Don't do that to yourself. Just write down for 3-4 days, maybe a week or 2, depending on the nature of your business. If every day feels kind of similar, a few days is fine. If you feel like every day is totally different, well, then give yourself a week or 2 to just non-judgmentally write down what you did, how much time you spent. And then you can go back and look at those audit results and say, okay, this is where I'm spending the majority of my time that's not helping my business. How can I streamline this? That's the question. How do I streamline this or delegate it? Or just eliminate it completely, right? Maybe AI is the solution. Maybe it's not, but you've got to do that first step.
Awesome. All right. Mike, if people want to learn more about you, the AI hat, or any of the stuff you're sharing about artificial intelligence, where can we send them online?
Best place to go is the aihat.com/connect. When you go there, you can learn more about me. You can follow me on your preferred social channel if that's what you want to do. You can learn more about the podcast or the community. Whatever you want to learn about, you can find it on that one URL.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much. Good seeing you again, my friend. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Rich. Appreciate you.
For a full transcript of this week's episode, a blog post written about the episode, the show notes, all the links that Mike shared with us, just head on over to our website at theagentsofchange.com/607. If you're looking for an action item from this week's episode, here's your homework. Pick one task you've done at least 3 times this week. Document the steps, and then build an AI assistant for it. You've got the blueprint, now use it. Because building systems that let you focus on what drives results is what turns you into an agent of change.
Don't miss another thrilling episode of the Agents of Change podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform.